Good morning to one and all. First of all, I would like to place on record my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers of this faculty development program, especially the manager, the principal, the coordinator of the faculty development program, and Dr. Deepak also, to extend me an opportunity to address and handle a session in this prestigious faculty development program. Thank you once again to the organizers. Thank you. So my presentation has been titled as the structure of relationships and the exploratory factor analysis, a discussion. That is the title of my presentation. So I think it is better I shall share my screen, isn't it? That would be more better. So I am about to share my screen. Sir, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Your screen is presented.
So the topic is the structure of the relationship and the exploratory factor analysis. So okay, so we start from this basic idea of group differences within the phenomenon under consideration. Actually, for every research program, every research study, we are actually trying to capture the empirical reality, or we are attempting to capture the social or physical phenomena which is being under our observation. And what happens is that if the empirical reality or the social physical phenomenon is one and the same everywhere, there would not have been much curiosity to further study and explore the phenomenon. See, for example, suppose we are conducting a study regarding the academic performance of students, or take an example from the current scenario. So we are actually studying about the details of the patients of this COVID disease. Now, when we are studying this situation, we have to collect information regarding the various aspects of the patients. And after collecting information and after observing this information, suppose if we feel that these characteristics are one and the same across our context of study or our area of study, then there would not have been any further curiosity to study and explore the phenomenon. Suppose, for example, in the case of Kerala, suppose if the mortality rate, if the morbidity rate, if the prevalence rate, all are one and the same across the particular area of study within the district, which means that across different panchayats, different taluks, across various districts within the state, then there would not have been much curiosity to explore this phenomenon. Similarly, with respect to other states also, if everywhere the situation is uniformly taking place, or the phenomenon under consideration is uniformly taking place, then there would not have been much curiosity to explore the phenomenon in a detailed manner. So with respect to the academic performance of students, if all the students of our class is getting 65% of the marks, then we would not have been worried too much. But the point where we came to know that in the neighboring class or in the neighboring college, students are getting 75% of the marks, or the students are getting only 50% of the total marks, then there would be some curiosity. So we want to explore this reason, the reason for such a difference, which means that whenever we observe differences with respect to the phenomenon between regions, between individuals, between objects under consideration, then we look for details, search for reasons. or more specifically, formally, we undertake a serious study of it. So, at our attempts to understand the various aspects of this phenomenon, because once we have already observed differences with respect to that phenomenon across region, across individuals, across objects under observation. We start attempts to understand that phenomenon, which eventually leads to what we generally refer in research methodology as the conceptual. We attempt the conceptualization of the problem. It eventually leads to the conceptualization of the problem. Then we very well know that the conceptualization of the problem requires certain things. So I'm not going into the details of that particular process. Then concepts are being derived, theoretical constructs are being thought of, and after deriving the concepts or the theoretical constructs, we try to classify that theoretical constructs or try to classify that particular concept in order to know more about that. And that process actually takes place by exploring relationships. And once we explore the relationships, eventually we form theories also. Okay. So more specifically, the conceptualization of the problem starts something like this from concepts or theoretical constructs. Then we identify the various properties or the various manifestations of that particular concept or that construct. Then, and actually that different manifestations of that concept or the construct, we get variables, the different manifestations. For example, the different properties, simply speaking, the different properties. And in that manner, we get variables. And once we get the variables, and once we observe or evaluate all these variables, we find that certain variables cluster together, or certain variables seem as one and the same, and some others are quite different. So in that manner, we attempt to make some classification of the variables. Okay. So after we classify these variables, then immediately we find that again there is some clustering taking place. We can have groups of that variables. And once we form the groups consequent to the classification of variables, then there will be group differences. So once we have group differences, we try to know what are the reasons behind that. We try to build relationships actually. What are the factors which are resulting in such a difference between different categories or across regions, across individuals, or across objects under consideration. Okay. Now, this much I would like to discuss as a very basic idea before going into more detail in a detailed manner of this factor analysis. So before that, we take a real example also. Consider, and this is a study that we have already undertaken in the previous years. So we have conducted an analysis of an irrigation project in Kerala. And as a part of that evaluation of the irrigation project, one important aspect is to evaluate the management of that irrigation project, the various canal system of that irrigation project, and how that canal system have been managed. So we referred it as the irrigation management. So it becomes a theoretical construct which cannot be directly or indirectly observable. Now, how can we get more information regarding this irrigation management? So which means that we attempt to identify the different manifestations of that irrigation management. And once we identify the different manifestations, we can have variables. So in that manner, we identify, consequent to the identification of manifestations, we get variables such as, and these are the few variables that we have identified as manifestation of the larger construct irrigation management, the coordination with water users association, the application of technology for irrigation, promotional campaign on participatory irrigation management, the environmental sustainability, and so on. Actually, we have identified some 24 to 26 manifestations of irrigation management. Remember, these manifestations are considered as variables. Okay. Now, after identifying these manifestations or variables, we have a pilot survey. We had already conducted a pilot survey and found that these manifestations of this larger theoretical construct is not same across regions, across different economic class of farmers, and so on. So we identified the differences in irrigation management within the ambit of the project area. So across space, such as, so because since the canal system is involved, this irrigation management is studied with respect to that canal system. So we identified different categories across space, such as the head area of the canal system, the middle area of the canal system, and the tail area of the canal system. So there is one classification across which the theoretical construct irrigation management has been identified as different. So similarly, we can identify other categories of differences, such as once we observe this irrigation management across farm size. So we know that not the farm size are not same across the entire catchment area of the project. Similarly, the economic status of the farmers, that also will vary. So depending upon the variation of farm size, their approach or their response to irrigation management will be quite different, or the manifestation of irrigation management will be quite different. Similarly, depending upon the variation, depending upon the differences of economic status of farmers, again, this manifestation of irrigation management will be different. So suppose, as actually I have told you earlier, if this manifestation is exactly same across the different spatial area of the canal system, suppose within the head area, middle area, the tail area, everyone is experiencing the same phenomenon, same experience, then there would not have been much curiosity to explore further. Similarly, across all farm sizes, similarly across economic status, all the farmers have the same view regarding the irrigation management, then we will be totally in a comfortable situation, that everything is going in a very nice and comfortable manner. So we will be totally in a comfortable position. Okay. But in reality, things are not like that. So because of that, we conduct detailed study. Now, once we identify these group differences, we immediately come to the conclusion that there may be some connections. So these interconnections among the variables needs to be explored. And that interconnections among the variables are being explored by studying the underlying structure of relationship. Because we have several variables. So these are a few such variables identified in the study. We have 10 variables. So these variables are also being connected each other. Because of that, people have differing experience with respect to irrigation management. So there may be some interconnections, and we explore that interconnections by studying the structure of the relationship. The structure of the relationship is actually being studied by explored by computing the correlation between different variables. And once we derive the correlation between different variables, see, first we actually do is we take the correlation between the variable 1 with respect to variable 1 itself. And we know that there are only one single variable. So we are taking the correlation between variable 1 with variable 1, the correlation of water users with coordination of water users. So the value of the correlation coefficient will be 1. So similarly, we try to take the correlation between coordination with water users and application of technology. So we will get one correlation coefficient, the Karl Pearson's, the familiar Karl Pearson's correlation coefficient, R, has been computed. Similarly, the correlation coefficient between coordination and promotional campaign, and so on. And once we study this structure of relationship, we find that certain variables are being correlated more, and certain other variables are correlated less, which means that some underlying variable is, some super underlying variable is there. And in the context of factor analysis, we consider that underlying variable which influences the variables under study as latent variable. Because once we study the correlation between different variables, we find that certain variables are correlating more and certain other variables are correlating less. So which means that the variables which are correlating more is being actually influenced by some underlying variable. There can be some underlying relationship. So that underlying relationship, we do not know which one is that, or what is the factor, or which variable is beneath there, which creates this intercorrelation. And that variable is called as the latent variable. In the context of factor analysis, it is also called as the component, the principal component and the other components, or more generally speaking, the factor. So in that manner, we get the name factor analysis. So the components or factors or the latent variable within the structure of relationship upon to which the visible variables or the explicit variables that we consider are gravitating, are pulling into. And once we identify that latent variables or the components or the factors, then these factors are actually interpreted to represent the larger theoretical construct in the context of analysis. So the larger theoretical construct in the context of our analysis is irrigation management. So actually irrigation management cannot be directly observable or not even indirectly observable. And we can only identify certain manifestations of that. And we collect information regarding the manifestations, and then we study that different manifestations as variables. We compute the correlation between them. And after studying the correlation, we identify the super variable or the latent variable or the factor. And once we derive the factors, we interpret these factors as representing the theoretical construct irrigation management under consideration. Now, since this particular methodology eventually results in very fewer number of factors. Suppose in the original analysis, there may be some 25 variables are there, which represent the manifestations of the larger theoretical construct. So after doing all this process and after we derive this latent variable, the number of that latent variables will be very small. The components, the number of components or factors will be small. So since the number of variables are reduced with the help of factors, the technique of factor analysis is generally regarded as a dimension reduction tool. So it is in this manner SPSS is locating this particular tool. Okay. Now I have told you that we explore the correlation between different variables. So go to, I shall show this particular slide. So all that explicit variables are being taken. And this is the first table that we get after conducting the factor analysis or the principal component analysis in SPSS. This is the first table. So on the horizontal axis and on the vertical axis, the same variables are being taken. This is a big matrix. So I have taken only a small portion of that matrix. So this first matrix is considered as the R matrix. R matrix means we know that the measure of the correlation is Karl Pearson's R coefficient, the small r. So since this is multiple correlation, the multiple correlation coefficient is represented as capital R. So this is called as the R matrix, or simply speaking, the correlation matrix. See, the first variable is the management. Also, here a particular order is there. Management of the left bank canal. So it has been correlated with itself. So the correlation coefficient will be always 1. Now the same variable is being correlated with the management of the right bank canal, and there will be a correlation of 9.18, which means that there is a fairly high correlation. Then it has been correlated with the water supply management and so on. Now we have another variable called as the seepage. So we know that for every canal system, there will be seepage of water. And when we have taken the correlation between the management of the left bank canal with the manifestation. So seepage is a manifestation, because when we collect information from the respondents, when we collect information from the farmers who are living near to that canal system or in that catchment area, they may say that there may be seepage. So a lot of seepage of water is there, and it is affecting the efficient management of the irrigation system. So people may respond like that. So in that manner, we got the variable seepage. It's a manifestation of the larger theoretical construct of irrigation management. So when we have taken the correlation of management of left bank canal with the seepage, see the correlation, the value of the correlation coefficient is very low. It's 0.11. So there is little correlation between the management of the left bank canal and seepage. So which means that since the respondents has pointed out that there is seepage, it may not be with respect to the left bank canal, it may be with respect to some other canal and so on. So this is the thing actually. Now, so consider another variable, maintenance of inspection of roads. So this has been taken for a specific purpose that I will come to later. Okay, so we go back to the initial slide. So this is the R matrix, the matrix which shows the Karl Pearson's correlation coefficient, the R, between variables. And also, once we evaluate this correlation matrix, we know that it correlates with itself perfectly, but it correlates with all the other variables less than perfectly. To a variable like seepage, there is a very little correlation. And once we observe the entire R matrix, we can see a lot of variations. Lot of variations is there with respect to the correlation. So this variation with respect to the correlation coefficient has to be summarized. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to reach at a conclusion. So this becomes a very bulky table, lot of information. It's quite unwieldy also, not a handy one. No conclusion can be made out of such a big matrix. So what we normally do is we try to summarize this big picture. This big picture is being summarized by using the statistical concept called as variance, because a lot of variation is there. So this variation is being represented or captured by the term variance. And we very well know that variance is a square root of standard deviation. It's a measure of dispersion. It's a measure of variability. Okay. So the correlation of one variable with various variables are not same, and we capture that idea with the variance. Now, so we have a lot of variation. So we want to summarize this variation. So what we do is we first consider the total variation, or the total variance. We consider the total variance. Simply speaking, the total variation in the correlation matrix. And a closer examination of this total variance shows that it can be classified, it can be divided into two: the common variance and the unique variance. Actually, there is nothing new in this particular context. We are all quite familiar with the idea of ANOVA, the analysis of variance. And there also we have this division of the total variation, the variation between groups. Suppose we know that ANOVA. So I understand that participants are quite aware of the tool ANOVA. So suppose we have 4 groups, we have to consider a comparison of these 4 groups. We know that the variance of these 4 groups are not same, and that idea is called as the variance between. And again, within a group, there can also be a variation within a group. So it is called as the variance within in the context of ANOVA. So to draw a parallel between ANOVA and the factor analysis, I have written like that. So the common, so in the terminology of factor analysis, it is common variance and the unique variance. So common variance can be thought of as variance between, and the unique variance can be thought of as variance within. Okay. Then a little more closer examination of unique variance shows that certain variance is specific to that variable, and some other variance is related to the error variance or random variance. Anyway, forget about that. Just consider that the total, we can capture the total variance in the R matrix, and the total variance can be divided into the common variance and the unique variance. Okay. Common variance means the variance between different variables. Then unique variance means the variance within that variable. So we consider an example. Consider the maintenance of inspection rods. So because of that, I have taken this particular rectangle with the rose color. So maintenance of inspection rods. So it correlates with itself with a value of 1, and with all the other variables, there is less than perfect correlation. Okay. So now what is the reason for this differences in variation? Okay. It is composed of two things, the common variance and the unique variance. Think about the common variance. Its condition, so the maintenance of inspection rods. So the inspection rods, the condition of the inspection rods for the irrigation project under consideration has been taken into analysis. So we ask about the condition regarding the maintenance of inspection rods among the various respondents. Then they will give some response. Then we consider that response with respect to the other manifestations. So that is called as the common variance. Now, the maintenance of these inspection rods in the state is actually not a specific thing with respect to that project itself. There may be many irrigation projects, and there may be many roads also. The public works department, PWD department is there, and the irrigation department is there. The roads near to this canal system is under the irrigation department, we very well know. So the irrigation department has particular policy regarding the maintenance of inspection roads under its various river valley projects. So there will be a general policy regarding the maintenance of inspection roads. So that factor also influences the maintenance of inspection road under the project we consider. So two things are there. There can be a special policy of maintenance of inspection roads within the irrigation project, and there is an overall policy regarding the maintenance of inspection roads of canal system all over the state. So the specific situation within the project is called as the common variance, and that has been actually correlated with the other manifestations within the irrigation project. And at the very same time, the situation of inspection roads is connected with the general policy adopted by the irrigation department in the whole state as well. The general condition of inspection roads in the state, that is called as the unique variance. Actually, it is not connected with the other variables that we explicitly consider in the irrigation project under consideration. So it has no connection with the other variables. So I think this is the idea of common variance and the unique variance. Okay. This is important actually, because of that I have explained this. Now what happens is that depending upon this common variance, factor analysis develops a concept called as a particular idea called as communality. So maybe some participants may be quite familiar with the idea of communality in the context of factor analysis. Actually, this communality means the common variance between various variables under consideration. And we know that common variance is the sum of common variance plus unique variance. Okay. Now, with respect to this communality, we have a problem. Actually, the entire factor analysis is actually depending upon the value of communality, the common variance, because it is actually basically on the basis of the correlation matrix, R matrix. We study the relationship, the structure of relationship with the help of R matrix. And it is on the basis of that we proceed further. So the variance, the entire variance in the R matrix is called as common variance. And that common variance is used to derive the concept communality. So which means that we must know communality to conduct factor analysis. But the problem is that we do not know about communality unless we conduct the factor analysis. So the factors are derived on the basis of common variance, but to get that common variance, we have to conduct factor analysis, and this is an impasse. This is a small knotty issue. We need to know about communality to conduct factor analysis, but this communality we do not know at the initial point. We derive this communality by conducting factor analysis. So this is a problem. So this problem will be bypassed by making few assumptions. So the first assumption is that the entire variance is common variance itself. So whatever be the communality, whatever be the common variance that we see with respect to the correlation matrix, the entire variance is common variance. There is absolutely no unique variance. So that is the first method. Then the second method is that to derive the common variance, we conduct a multiple regression analysis. For example, we take one variable, and that one variable randomly as independent variable, and take all the other variables as dependent variable. We conduct a multiple regression analysis. Then after running this regression, we can easily derive the R square value, the goodness of a fit R square value. So this R square value will represent the common variance or the communality. Then we use that community values to conduct the factor analysis. So these are the two methods by which we bypass the problem that I have mentioned earlier. So we bypass this issue by assuming that all variance is common variance. The second one is that finding common variance through the method of multiple regression. So now, depending upon these two methods by which we deal with the issue of common variance or communality, we have two methods. The first one is the principal component analysis, and the second one is the confirmatory, the factor analysis, or more specifically, the confirmatory factor analysis. So principal component analysis means it considers all variance in the correlation matrix, the R matrix is common variance. That is, there is no unique variance. So once that assumption is taken, and if we move further, that is called as the principal component analysis. And the confirmatory factor analysis bypasses the earlier issue by conducting initially a multiple regression and derive the communality values, and using that communality values to find out the common variance. In the case of factor analysis, there is both the common variance and the unique variance, because we know that in the regression analysis, we have the explanatory variables and we have the stochastic disturbance term. Okay, the stochastic disturbance term will take care of all the disturbances or all the influences within a variable. Okay. Now moving to the principal component analysis, because in this presentation I shall focus upon the principal component analysis. Now, what is the reason for taking such an assumption? So we have a very good reason to make such an assumption that the entire variance is common variance. And because of that, we conduct a principal component analysis. So in principal component analysis, actually, we are interested to derive the latent variable upon to which the main variables are gravitated, or the explicit variables are gravitated. So this is the thing that is our initial interest. We want to explore the structure of relationship within a correlation matrix. We want to explore the structure of the relationship and want to know whether there is any super variable, whether there is any latent variable which influences the variables underneath. So that is our interest. Hence, it is quite logical to consider that all variance is common variance, because our purpose is to know whether there is any latent variable. And because of that, we make that assumption. But however, even though for the time being and for serving our purpose, this particular assumption is reasonable, but we must be quite aware of the quite remindful of the fact that in reality, total variance is always composed of common variance and unique variance. So that has to be kept in our mind. In short, the principal component analysis and factor analysis can be considered as two different methods of extracting factors. So actually both have some similarity, and that similarity is that both attempts to extract the latent factors from the R matrix, but with different assumptions. Now these factors are being extracted. Once these factors are extracted, I shall explain about the process of factor extraction in the slides which are coming. But at the time being, I shall mention about the idea of factor rotation. So once these factors are being extracted, to have more interpretability, for the sake of having simple interpretation. So in every analysis, the interpretation part is more important, because the statistical part is in a sense mechanical. The software will does all the calculations. But once we get the result, the more important aspect is how do we interpret the results. So what happens is that once we extract the factors, there is always a problem of interpretation. So to make the interpretation of the factors in a simple and easy manner, we conduct a process called as factor rotation. So factor rotation is implemented after factor extraction to get such a set of factors which helps to have more interpretability. Okay. Now more about factor extraction. So as I have told you earlier, variables which correlate highly with one another are grouped to extract a factor. So that is the basic idea. Now we have another important concept called as a term called as factor loading. Factor loading simply means, and once we derive this latent factor, we know that certain variables are correlating with each other. Then on the basis of that, we consider a super factor or a latent factor. Now, on the one side, we have this latent factor, and the other side, we have the variables. Or more specifically, the variables are considered as independent variables, and the factor is considered as the dependent variable. So in that manner, we can visualize a regression equation. So on the left hand side, we have the factor, and on the right hand side, we have the variables. And these variables and that particular set of variables correlate highly with each other. Because of that, we have taken that variables together. Now, we have an idea of factor loading, which means that factor loading is the correlation of a variable and the corresponding factor. And suppose the factor loading is 0.4, suppose, and we will shortly see that factor loading. So suppose if the factor loading is 0.4, then the square of that factor loading, or the square of the correlation coefficient, simply speaking, it is 0.16, which shows that 16% of the variance in that factor is explained by that particular variable. So simply speaking, factor loading means the correlation between a variable and the corresponding factor. And the last one I have already explained. After extraction, to overcome the problems of interpretation, we use factor rotation. Okay. Now, once we identify all the factors through the process of extraction, we do not take all the factors, but we take only few factors depending upon a mathematical term called as eigenvalue. We only choose that factors. So in every factor analysis, so many factors will be identified, but we extract only few out of them. We can extract all the factors identified by the technique, but we generally extract only that factors which have high eigenvalues. Eigenvalues simply indicate the substantive importance of a factor. That also we will see soon. Now, one more thing I shall point out about this eigenvalue. Eigenvalue already means shows the substantive importance of a factor. Then these factors are being extracted on the basis of how high these eigenvalues, and to guide us regarding how high these eigenvalues, we use two concepts called as, the first one is the Scree plot and the second one is Kaiser criterion. So we will see all these things later. Okay. So the current point is that for the time being, not all factors are being extracted. Even though SPSS identifies all the latent factors, we do not take all that latent factors. We only extract the most important latent factors, and that which one are most important is actually identified on the basis of eigenvalue, the corresponding eigenvalue. Eigenvalue is a mathematical concept. It's not an easy one to explain, but we understand the intuitive meaning of eigenvalue is that it shows the substantive importance of the factor. Then how important one particular eigenvalue, how high this eigenvalue is determined on the basis of two measures called as the Scree plot and the Kaiser criterion. All these things we will see later. Okay. Now think about the Scree plot and the Kaiser criterion. See, these are the, I think you can see this first table. This first table will show the total variance in the correlation matrix. So these are eigenvalues. See, it is being given as referred as component rather than factor. And since we are doing the principal component analysis, and in principal component analysis, now we realize that whatever be the total variance, the entire variance is common variance. Because of that, we have the measure of the tool of principal component analysis. So this study almost identified that 13 factors, 13 latent factors, components. So these are the initial eigenvalues associated with the different factors. See, so this criteria is that, see, up to the 8th factor alone, we have extracted only the first 8 factors. So the Kaiser criterion, a particular criterion which says that if the eigenvalue is more than 1, then extract such latent factors. So here, for the 9th variable, the eigenvalue is less than 1, so we stop at 0.8. So 8 factors are being extracted. Okay. So the same idea has been cross-checked by using a Scree plot. Scree plot simply means we have a graph regarding the factors on the horizontal axis and the corresponding eigenvalues on the vertical axis. So the rule of thumb by which we use this Scree plot is that choose up to that component where we have the point of inflection. The point of inflection means the point after which the slope of the curve changes dramatically. So that particular point is called as the point of inflection. So here it becomes very difficult to identify the point of inflection. It can be only made in a mathematical manner, but by having this graphical observation, we generally say that 8 or 9 both are almost points of inflection. But by using, depending upon the total variance explained, we know that the eigenvalue of the 8th factor is higher than 1 higher than 1. We stop there. So which means that the scree plot can be considered as a measure to cross check the ideas given in the table of total variance explained. So by evaluating this table given as total variance explained, we choose how many factors are to be extracted. Okay. Then, as I have pointed out earlier, we employ a particular technique called as factor rotation. So factor rotation is nothing but a technique by which we improve interpretation. So the thing is that after completing this extraction, we get such 8 factors, and it becomes very difficult to explain these factors. So we want to explain these factors. We want to interpret them in a more easy manner. So for that purpose, we use this idea of rotation. So we have 2 types of rotation. The first one is the orthogonal rotation, which means that all the factors are independent with each other. So that is the meaning of orthogonal. This is a mathematical concept, totally unrelated. So we make the assumption that the factors are rotated in such a way that after rotation, there would not be any correlation between factors. So what happens is that after conducting this extraction, we get some 8 factors, and there can be correlation between that factors. So actually, because of that correlation between different factors, this interpretation becomes difficult. So to improve the interpretation aspect, we make some changes in such a way that the interpretation is an easy and straightforward one. Or simply speaking, or in a statistical sense, factors are rotated in such a way that there would not be any correlation between factors. And we inspect with respect to the rotated component matrix given by SPSS. And we have another type of rotation called as the oblique rotation. So in the case of oblique rotation, even after rotation, it permits some correlation between factors. So then we have 2 types of matrices. Once we conduct this oblique rotation, SPSS produces 2 tables. The first one is the structure matrix, and the other is the pattern matrix. So with respect to the oblique rotation, we use the pattern matrix to interpret the factors, to identify the factors. Now the thing is that once we conduct the principal analysis and we derive the factors, if we want to have factors which are totally independent with each other, if there should not be any correlation between factors, we have to use the orthogonal rotation. And if some correlation between the factors are inevitable according to the theory, one has to follow the oblique rotation. And it has to be noted that in social sciences, especially in social sciences, whatever be the factors, these factors are often correlated. So for example, with respect to the irrigation project, we have several variables, and even after extracting the latent factors out of that several variables, still all these factors can be correlated, because actually these factors are the result of human interaction. So in social sciences, all these manifestations are the result of human interaction with the society or with the physical phenomena. So which means that this correlation between different factors cannot be ruled out in a complete manner. So in social sciences, it is totally meaningless. So lot of literature is there. So the literature says that in social sciences, ruling out the correlation between factors is meaningless. So majority of the experts are saying that in social sciences, you have to follow oblique rotation. Unless otherwise you have special reason that there will not be any correlation between factors. Okay. Now, with respect to this oblique rotation, suppose in that study of irrigation project, I have conducted an oblique rotation. And since I have chosen that oblique rotation, we have the structure matrix and the pattern matrix. The structure matrix will show the correlation and the pattern matrix will show the regression coefficients. So we have to use this pattern matrix. See, these are the 8. This is the first factor. See, the number of the factors are given in columns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. So with respect to the first factor, so many variables are there. Suppose if we have 25 variables, we have the correlation, the value for all the 25 variables. But we focus upon that variables which correlate in a very high manner. See, coordination with water users association. It correlates highly with all the other variables. Agriculture extension and farmer training. The correlation coefficient is 0.87. Now consider maintenance of groundwater levels. The correlation between others is only 0.38. Similarly, removal of the areas of waterlogged. And so many other variables are there which has very less correlation. So we disregard all the other variables because the correlation between them is very low. So the general rule is that we consider that variables which has a correlation coefficient more than 0.4. So this is the general rule followed in the literature. So which means that we have some 8 variables. 8 variables are there which comes under the first factor. Similarly, by inspecting the second factor, take that variables which has a correlation coefficient greater than 0.4 and create the second factor and so on. Okay. Now, another important aspect is that the component correlation matrix. This component correlation matrix is a very important one. This component correlation matrix will show about the underlying correlation between different variables. It shows clearly whether to, it's another information which helps us to choose whether to adopt orthogonal rotation or oblique rotation. If the factors are uncorrelated, or if orthogonal rotation is the appropriate one, the component correlation matrix will be an identity matrix. So we know that identity matrix is a matrix whose diagonal values are 1 and all the other values are 0. So that is an identity matrix, which means that there is no correlation between different factors. See, on the horizontal axis and on the vertical axis, we have taken the factors. First 1 to 8 factors, the from first factor to the 8th factor. So we have simply taken the correlation between different factors. So the component correlation matrix shows that it is not an identity matrix, which means that even if we conduct an orthogonal rotation, if the component correlation matrix is not an identity matrix, the orthogonal rotation is not warranted. So to decide upon whether to conduct an orthogonal rotation or an oblique rotation, this component correlation matrix acts as a useful guide to the researcher to choose the type of rotation. So if the take-home message is that if the component correlation matrix is an identity matrix, choose the orthogonal rotation, and if it is not an identity matrix, use the oblique rotation. Now, among the oblique rotations, so many other rotations are there, but in the literature, generally it is being suggested to use the Promax oblique rotation. The Promax oblique. Within the category of oblique rotations, we have the Promax, and that is suggested. That is the suggested method, Because of the simple reason that it first does an orthogonal Varimax rotation. So once we choose the Promax rotation is an oblique rotation. So the Promax rotation proceeds in this manner. First it conducts the orthogonal Varimax rotation and then does the oblique rotation. So what happens is that if the factors are really orthogonal, the Promax rotation will produce results very close to that of the Varimax rotation. So even if we make some mistake, by some mistake we have used the oblique rotation. But if we have chosen the Promax rotation method, nothing to worry. It initially conducts the orthogonal Varimax rotation and then proceed to the oblique rotation. And if it is really Varimax orthogonal, then the results of the oblique rotation, the oblique Promax rotation will be almost the same to that of the Varimax. So a lot of literature is there which confirm this particular finding. Okay. Now, so these are the variables from coming back to the example under consideration. So these are the variables within the first factor. So coordination with water usage, application of technology of the firm, things like that. Now the most important aspect is this. All the tables that we have discussed earlier can be easily derived by running the command of factor analysis. SPSS will give all that results within a short period of time. But the most difficult task is to define the factor. Factors can be easily extracted by considering the eigenvalues. If the eigenvalue is greater than 1, we can choose that factor. But the most important task is to with respect to the definition of the factor. Now we have these 8 variables. Now by closely examining and debating and discussing about these variables, we define a particular factor. So in our study, we have defined the first factor as the proper utilization of available water resources. So this has been made at that point of time. Another researcher may have another definition for these 8 variables. Anyway, the point is that by using that 8 variables, we have defined the factor as the proper utilization of available water resource. So similarly, we have to define the other factors extracted from the factor analysis. So this is the most important aspect. A researcher has to spend a lot of time in discussing and debating regarding the definition of the factor. Okay. Now we have the factor scores. That is the final thing. The factor scores are very useful as it will help to know the score made by each respondent regarding the factor. So suppose we have the first factor, and that first factor is the proper utilization of available water resources. So with respect to that proper utilization of the available water resources, what was the score given by the first respondent? So upon that score, we will be quite interested. So the computation of factor scores is to serve that purpose, will help to know the score made by each respondent regarding the factor. And once we choose that particular option in the factor analysis, SPSS will save that factor scores separately. Now, what is the use of that? So this factor score will help to know whether the scores given by different groups of respondents are same or not. For instance, suppose I have already pointed out that we have the respondents can be grouped on the basis of income class. Again, the respondents can be grouped in terms of the spatial area of the canal system, the farmers who are residing in the head area, the farmers who are residing, the respondents who are residing in the middle area, the respondents who are residing in the tail area. Similarly, the respondents having a large sized farms, medium sized farms, and small sized farms. So we want to know, we will be quite interested, what would be the score given by a farmer living in the upper area with respect to this factor, proper utilization of available water resources. So once we get that information, we can explore this phenomenon in a very detailed manner. We can conduct correlation, we can conduct multiple regression, things like that. So actually that factor scores are derived in a very mathematical manner. I am not going into the details of that, things are given there. And once if you are particular to know the factor scores, then choose. So SPSS has given two methods, but out of that, the first one is the Bartlett method and the second one is the Anderson-Rubin method. So the better one is the Anderson-Rubin method according to the literature. So you simply choose that. The problem is that there can be correlation between the factor scores. So to remove that correlation between the factor scores, Anderson and Rubin has suggested a new method. So because of that, generally in literature, if you are interested to derive the factor scores, especially with the purpose of conducting a multiple regression later, it is better to follow the Anderson-Rubin method. Okay. Now, once it is in this manner we finish this principal component analysis. Now, the last aspect is that once we derive all these things, we want to know the questionnaire that we have used is a valid one or not. So validity becomes a very important aspect in any research. So associated with the concept of validity of the questionnaire, validity of the tool for collecting data, the important measure is reliability. So reliability must be there to have validity, but reliability is not a sufficient one for having validity. Simply speaking, reliability is essential, but it is not sufficient. And we know that reliability and validity are being defined in terms of statistical concepts. So in that manner, we can better understand. So reliability means the variance with respect to the scores that has been generated. For example, if the questionnaire is administered to the same respondent at different points of time, and if we get the same score, which means that there is absolutely no variation between the scores given by the same respondent at two different points of time. So the variation is nil. So on the basis of that variation or variance, we define reliability. If the variance is very small, there will be high reliability, and vice versa. If the variance is high, then there will be only low reliability. Then validity is a concept which can be broadly considered as goodness of a fit. So goodness of a fit means we have a model, and that model is being used to capture the reality. It is something like taking a photograph. Suppose we know that we are taking the photograph of nature or a flower. So a new camera, an advanced camera, will capture the reality in a much better manner. An entry level camera will capture the reality only in a very little manner. So goodness of a fit shows how much of the reality is being captured by the equipment, how much of the reality is being captured by the tool under consideration. So validity is that. So if the validity of the questionnaire that we are being used is very high, then what happens is that whatever be the original factor loadings, whatever be the original relationship between variables, that original relationship between variables, the correlation between variables will be captured by the model. Simply speaking, if the factor loadings in our model are very high, which means that we have captured the underlying relationship in a better manner. So in that manner, we can think about having a high level of validity of the tool under consideration. And with respect to reliability, I shall point out that this reliability is actually measured by using a concept called as Cronbach alpha. Cronbach alpha is nothing but the covariance divided by the item variance and covariance. Or simply speaking, in simple terms, now we are about to wind up this first part of the presentation. In simple terms, it measures the covariance between scores. The formula is actually covariance between is divided by sum of item variance and item covariances. Now I shall give you a simple rule of thumb. So whatever be the formula, if that formula has a numerator and denominator, we can always ignore the denominator, because the purpose of denominator is to standardize the numerator. So focus upon the numerator alone. So the Cronbach, with respect to the Cronbach alpha, it has a formula. On the numerator, Cronbach alpha measures the covariance between. And in the denominator, it is item variance and item covariances. Forget about that. It is used to standardize things. So focus upon the numerator. So the numerator is covariance. So in simple terms, Cronbach alpha measures what would be the covariance between different scores in the sample under consideration. So what happens is that we consider all the values, and when we compute the Cronbach alpha, the entire data set is being divided into two parts, and then consider the covariance in the first part with respect to the covariance of the second part. The finer aspect of Cronbach alpha is that the Cronbach alpha divides the data set under consideration in all the possible manner and calculates the covariance for the first part with respect to the covariance of the second part. If that covariance is very high, then which means that we have more reliable measure. Okay. So as a rule of thumb, if the Cronbach alpha is greater than 7, which means that there is high correlation between the two parts of the data set, which means that the scores given by different individuals are almost the same. Suppose the sample size is 200. We divide the sample into two parts. The first part includes 100 the scores given by 100 respondents, and the second part composes of the scores given by the remaining 100 respondents. Then we take the variance in these two parts. Then we compare the variance in the first part with the variance of the second part. If they are highly correlated, which means that there is uniformity with respect to the scores given by the respondents. And if that uniformity is high, or if the correlation is high, then we can say that we are using a reliable tool for the study. Okay, that is the basic idea. Okay, these are all about the details of that. Now with respect to, so these are all with respect to the interpretation part of the output. So first we have to inspect the R matrix, and also we have to see what is the value of the determinant. So this would be the first matrix given by the SPSS. Look upon the determinant. The value of the determinant must not be equal to 0. It must be greater than 0.0001. So the thing is that, and what is the meaning of this idea? The determinant, if the determinant is equal to 0, it implies that the R matrix does not have enough information to derive the factors, because we know about the idea of determinant. If the determinant's value is equal to 0, which means that there is dependence between, or it shows that the data set under consideration will have only less information. So this idea can be explained in a simple manner. We know that an equation can be solved if we have enough number of equations equal to the number of parameters to be derived, or the unknowns to be calculated. The number of the unknowns and the number of equations must be same. So only then we can solve a system of simultaneous equations. If you have 5 unknowns, there must be 5 equations. Only then we can solve. So this is the idea of the value of determinant equal to 0 or not. If the value of the determinant is equal to 0, which means that we have 5 unknowns, but we have only 4 equations, which means that it cannot be solved. So it must not, and if both are same, the number of unknowns and the number of equations are same, then the value of the determinant will not be equal to 0. That is the idea. Okay. Then focus upon the inverse of the R matrix. This inverse of R matrix, actually there is no need to evaluate too much upon the inverse of the R matrix. The purpose of the inverse of R matrix is to find the factor scores. Then we have the sample adequacy test, whether the sample is an adequate one or not, depending upon the KMO statistic. The KMO statistic must be greater than 0.5. Then another sample adequacy test is the Bartlett's measure, which again conduct a null hypothesis, a hypothesis test upon whether the original correlation matrix is an identity matrix or not. So if it is an identity matrix, which means that there is no correlation between the variables under consideration. So the Bartlett measure shows that whether the correlation matrix under consideration is an identity matrix or not. So I am not going into the details of that. So the point is that you have to examine the Bartlett's measure and make sure that the hypothesis is being rejected. And with respect to KMO statistic, make sure that the value is greater than at least 0.5. Then factor extraction I have already mentioned. The communality value must be, the eigenvalue must be greater than 1. Eigenvalue is taken as a measure of the communality. It must be greater than 1. Okay. Now we have another matrix, is the reproduced matrix and the residual matrix. The reproduced matrix shows the correlation on the basis of the model, and the residual matrix, the difference between the R matrix and the reproduced matrix. Actually, we have the R matrix. The R matrix is the original matrix. Then on the basis of the model that we use, we calculate the correlation between the variables again, and that is called as the reproduced matrix. And the difference between the original R matrix and the reproduced matrix is called as the residual matrix. So make sure that at least 50% of the residuals are greater than 5. Greater than, at least 50% of the residuals are greater than 0.5. Okay. Then the component correlation matrix. Inspect that component correlation matrix. If it is an identity matrix, go for orthogonal. If it is not identity matrix, go for the oblique rotation. Okay. Then compute the Cronbach alpha. The value of the Cronbach alpha, according to the literature, it must be at least greater than 0.7. Okay. Then again, one more important aspect is there. So to calculate the reliability of the tool, we have to calculate the reliability by each factor. So compute the Cronbach alpha factor wise. So take the variables which comprise the first factor, and then calculate the Cronbach alpha for the first factor. Then again calculate the reliability of the second factor, and so on. Okay. Now these are the screenshots of conducting factor analysis, and I am not going to explain. So 5 options are there. We have the descriptives, extraction, rotation, scores, and options. So we have to go through all these things. So this is the descriptives. You must choose all these ones. Normally, we need to know only few things, but if problems are there, we have to inspect everything. So because of that, every option has to be chosen, and this is the suggested one in the literature. Okay. Then with respect to the extraction, see, the method is principal component. So many other methods are there. I have focused only upon the PCA, principal component analysis. So the method is principal component analysis. Choose the correlation matrix, the unrotated factor solution, and the scree plot. Now, based on eigenvalues greater than 1, extract that alone. Okay. Then with respect to the rotation, so many options are there. The Varimax is there. So Varimax is popular among researchers, But remember, I have pointed out that in the literature clearly argues that in social sciences, the factors will have some correlation between each other. So it is better to follow oblique rotation and also inspect the component correlation matrix. If the component correlation matrix is not an identity one, there is absolutely no point in following the orthogonal rotation, the Varimax rotation. So choose the rotated solution also. Then regarding the scores, factor scores, check the same as variable. So SPSS will add new variables into the original data set. So you will have variables being added in the original data set. Choose the Anderson-Rubin method. Okay. Then with respect to the options, exclude cases list-wise and sorted by size. Okay. There is no need to check the suppress small coefficients. Now with respect to the reliability thing, analyze scale reliability analysis. Then the model is Cronbach alpha. Choose this Cronbach alpha. Then go to the statistics and click two things, the correlations and the scale if item is deleted. Then this is the output of the Cronbach alpha. See, the value is Cronbach alpha is 0.86. The rule of thumb is if it should be greater than 0.7. Okay. Now this table is important. The inter-item correlation matrix. Okay. Then the final table, the item total statistics. So you have to inspect these two columns. The corrected item, total correlation. So the literature says that you must ensure that at least the values must be greater than at least 0.3. Otherwise there will be problems. So which means that the C page, the variable C page has a value less than 0.3. So which means that that variable has to be eliminated from the factor analysis if you want to have more reliability. So what happens is that you have to conduct the entire factor analysis again by excluding the variable C page. Then what happens is that when we exclude variables, the extracted factors may also change. So it's an iterative method. Factor analysis is an iterative process, remember that. Then also inspect the Cronbach alpha if the item is deleted. See what happens that if the variable is deleted, the overall value of the Cronbach alpha will increase 0.88. See, this is the original value. The original value of Cronbach alpha is 0.86. So what happens is that if we eliminate the C page, the variable C page, the value of the Cronbach, final value of the Cronbach alpha will increase from 0.86 to 0.88. So what happens if the, suppose, consider the water discharged. If we eliminate water discharge from the factor analysis, the value of the Cronbach alpha will fall. It was actually 0.86. If you eliminate that, it will fall to 0.82. So we have to keep that variable. So this particular table has also to be evaluated carefully. Now with respect to the reporting. So this is the generally accepted method that we see in the literature with respect to the reporting of factor analysis. So we have to identify the factors. This is the first factor. Okay. This output is with respect to after conducting the reliability analysis. So after conducting the reliability analysis, see what happens. No. The thing is that see we have 25 variables. So you have to give all the variables. I have given to make the table a handy one. I have taken only the first 10 variables alone. See, the first 8 variables have a value greater than 0.4. So that alone will be chosen. So the 9th variable has a factor loading of 0.15. The 10th variable has a factor loading of 0.22. So that has been eliminated. So in the first factor, we have taken only the first 8 variables. But in reporting, you have to show the entire variables in the table. So for the presentation, I have taken only 10 variables. Then represent the total eigenvalue for the first factor. Then the percentage of variance. the cumulative percentage of variance, and the Cronbach alpha. So it is in this manner we have to report the factor analysis in the thesis or in the paper. So this is the generally accepted method of reporting principal component analysis or the factor analysis. Okay. Thank you. So by these words, I conclude my initial presentation.
Yeah, sir. Shall we get into the question answer session? Or?
Yeah, certainly. So
Yeah,
it has been a lengthy one.
Yeah, it's a really very nice presentation, sir. We'll hand out the sessions to the participants.
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you.